And you're live, Congresswoman.
Well, thank you all for joining me here today for this incredibly important discussion. Over the past few years, we saw a disturbing rise in hate crimes in our country, especially in our places of worship. Religious freedom sits at the core of who we are as Americans. It's one of the founding principles that I defended in the Navy, and one that I personally worked to preserve in New Jersey as I did outreach to different religious communities while serving at the U.S. Attorney's Office. The threats and violence we continue to see cannot go unchecked. That's why I'm so grateful you have all joined today to discuss the Nonprofit Security Grant Program. The program provides funds for nonprofits and houses of worship to enhance their physical security infrastructure, hire security guards, and conduct active shooter training. Each year since coming to Congress, I've supported increased funding for the program. Sadly, hate crimes and violence impact many different religions and ethnicities. Since coming into office, I've attended vigils across New Jersey 11 for the victims of the Charleston church shooting, the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, and the Christchurch Mosque shooting, along with roundtables to combat anti-Semitism in the wake of hostages being held in a synagogue in Colleyville, and events to highlight the unacceptable increase in anti-Asian American violence since the beginning of the pandemic. I'm committed to keeping all New Jerseyans safe, and I wanted to make sure you have the information you need to navigate the Nonprofit Security Grant application enrollment process and learn more about the expanded eligibility. I appreciate that Director Lori Duran and her staff from the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness are here with us today to walk us through it all and answer questions. After I give Director Duran a minute for some opening remarks, we will turn it over to Senior Grants Administrator Margaret Grushenko for an overview of the program. We will also have time to take questions from the audience through the Q&A chat box function. So if you have a question, please ask it in the chat box at the bottom of your screen at any time. And now I'd like to hand it over to Director Lori Duran. Thanks so much for joining us, Director Duran.
Oh, good morning. Again, thank you very much for inviting me, Congressman Sherrill. We really appreciate it. My team and I are very happy here to help and be with you today. While OHSP is widely known for cybersecurity and counterterrorism efforts, I want to briefly talk with you about one of our most impactful initiatives, which would be our Nonprofit Security Grant Program. For several years now, OHSP has administered both a state and federal nonprofit security grant program to those nonprofits demonstrating that they are at a high risk for a terrorist attack. Both programs are used to enhance security capabilities for organizations with more, specifically funding for security personnel and target hardening equipment purchases. One caveat is that the federal program can fund a few auxiliary items, including security-related training, exercises, and planning. We've seen considerable success with these reimbursement programs, having awarded $6.9 million in funding through the state program since 2019, and $32 million over the past 2 years to the federal program, which I may add was third in the nation for total award amounts in 2021, just behind California and New York. One of our major goals in 2022 and beyond is to broaden and expand the number of NJOHSP grant recipients, which is why I'm so grateful to be here talking with you all today. We're interested in nonprofits to begin their application process early, oftentimes weeks in advance. While the federal program is poised to accept applications in the coming weeks, our state program typically accepts applications in the fall. Prior to applying, we encourage applicants to attend or view one of our webinars or workshops. As many of our recipients can attest to, these workshops and webinars will give you a leg up by serving as a resource for refining the language and producing successful investment justifications. Now, I'll have to stop short of stealing all the thunder from our Grants Bureau, as we have one of our resident experts, Margaret Grushenko, on in attendance here with us, who will be more than happy to get into the woods with you on all these grant programs. On a final note, remember that we have many resources on our website, njohsp.gov, including information on submitting your application or an email to our grants program should you have any follow-on questions. Thank you again for your time, and we look forward to working with many of you in the future.
Good morning.
My name is Margaret Grushenko. I am a grants liaison overseeing the nonprofit security grants program, the federal component of it. And I'm pleased today to be here to help you to navigate this very important process to secure resources for your agencies and to protect them from threats. So I'm going to now share my screen. I'm going to turn off my video for this portion. And just give me a moment. Okay. And
Yep, looks good, Margaret.
let's see. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you and we can see the slides.
And you can see the slides. Okay. All right. So here we go. Without further ado. So today I'm going to be providing an overview for you of both the federal and state nonprofit security grant programs. While the federal program has been around for over a decade, the state program is a little bit newer. It's been around for a few years. There's many similarities between both programs, but there's also some distinct differences that I want to note for you today. And also I want to underscore that on our website, njhomelandsecurity.gov, we do have our recorded applicant workshops, and I want to encourage you to go check those out. It will give you a heads up and really give you more substantive information. My program, the federal program, we're going to be updating the applicant workshop because the notice of funding opportunity is about to come out. So anything that's new will be incorporated. But in the meantime, please do go check out those applicant workshops. Okay, so the NSGPs are federal and state funded grant programs, and they're designed to support target hardening and physical security to nonprofit organizations throughout the state that are deemed to be at greatest risk for a terrorist attack. And I just want to go over briefly, what does that mean, greatest risk? We define risk in the following way. It's the product of three principal variables that we want you to be thinking about: threat, vulnerability, and consequence. Okay, and threat, that means that you're identifying and substantiating when you're getting ready to do your application, and you'll see how things are framed out and how you're asked, but you're identifying and substantiating the specific threats or attacks against your organization or against organizations that are closely related to yours by terrorist entities. Okay, and vulnerability, then you're thinking about your agency itself. What is your susceptibility? What are the gaps in security at your agency? And the consequences, what would be the ramifications of a terrorist attack to your agency? What would the negative effects be to your human and your systematic assets that you have? So those are the three components of risk. We're going to ask you in your application, how are you going to prevent those threats? How are you going to protect your citizens and your assets? And how do you plan to mitigate loss of life? Okay, so as we get a little bit further ahead into the program today, I'm going to go over the investment justification, but that's really the crux and a core component that you need to be thinking about. The program up on the screen, you'll see core capabilities. This program also identifies core capabilities that it seeks to build and sustain. Okay, so those are listed there for you. The nonprofit security grant program also seeks to integrate the preparedness activities of nonprofit organizations that are at high risk for terrorist attacks with broader state and local preparedness efforts. So at our offices, preparedness is a main focus. We like to use these grants like to incorporate that preparedness component. So what does that mean exactly? An organization can help accomplish this goal, and this is asked on the application, by working with local law enforcement, letting it know the types of target hardening equipment that it has, and how they can work in concert together. The NSGP program also promotes emergency preparedness, coordination, and collaboration activities. Again, what does that mean? An organization can help to accomplish this goal by notifying, for example, the Office of Emergency Management and letting it know that its facility offers, for example, things like shelter in place, triage space, medical assistance. So you'll be asked about that on your application. Okay, so keep that in mind as well. Eligibility requirements of the federal program. You are eligible if you are an IRS approved tax exempt 501c3 nonprofit organization. And I do want to note that the IRS does not require certain organizations such as churches, synagogues, mosques to apply for and receive this exemption under the 501c3 statute. So you may not have the letter. You are automatically exempt. Okay, but we will need your EIN number, even if you do not have the letter. So keep that in mind. You are eligible for this grant if your organization is determined to be at high risk for the terrorist attack. Again, we just went over what that means, what those components are, and you'll be asked about that in your application. Please keep in mind when you're applying what region you're in. We have the UASI territory, that's the Urban Area Security Initiative. That's what that stands for. Those are the counties that fall under it. And then we have the state, and those are the counties that fall under that. If you apply under the wrong one, that's grounds for possible disqualification. So please be mindful. Federal NSGP current criteria, the maximum dollar amount for either the NSGP UA or S is $150,000 per site. So if you're an organization, this was kind of something that came into play as new over the years, you can actually apply for a maximum of up to 3 sites. And what qualifies as a site is that your buildings have their own addresses. Okay, so as an organization, you can apply with 3 separate IJs, but they must, to be considered a separate site, the building must have its own address. A campus that has, more than 1 building, but the same address would not qualify for this. This is a competitive grant program. All funds are awarded on a reimbursement basis. So you're going to be putting the money out and then you will seek reimbursement from us. There are no cash advancements associated with the program. And also bonus points may be given to eligible nonprofits that have not received this funding in the past. So that does give possibly a leg up to agencies who have not benefited from the program. But we'll figure that out and find out when we receive the notice of funding opportunity that's set to come out soon. Application requirements. Okay, these are similar to the state program, which I'm going to go over. You're going to need that 501c3 letter if applicable, like I just explained. You're going to need your vulnerability risk assessment. This is very important. Each applicant must complete a vulnerability risk assessment of its facility. That's determining what those gaps are, okay, that I spoke about. This will form the basis of your investment justification or application. And to complete a risk assessment, you can contact your local police department will help you, your county prosecutor's office, private security company if you prefer, and then they will prepare that for you and come do a walkthrough and identify what those gaps are. You also, if you're not able to do that or don't have time or for whatever reason, we have a self-assessment tool on our website. It's available at njhomelandsecurity.gov. You can do that assessment yourself and submit that, and that will be fine for your application. Also, recently available, there's another self-assessment tool, and there's some information about that on the slide, and I've put the links to it, so you can certainly look at that as well. Your investment justification, that's your main application. It's going to have all the substantive details about your organization, your project proposal, what you want to do, everything will be contained with that. Organization mission statement, for some of you may have applied prior, that used to be a separate document. It is now no longer separate. Instead, the mission statement will be entered as your organization type during the online application process. And I did also want to note that the only entity that's eligible to apply to the NSGP program is the state administrative agency. So that's us. NJOHSP is the state administrative agency. So your application begins by applying to us. We score it and prepare it and organize it. We send it off to FEMA, and then it's scored again. Federal NSGP application requirements continued. To be considered for funding, visit our website during the open application phase. I'm going to get a little more specific about when that is in a moment. Applications for both the NSGP UA program and the S program have to be submitted electronically, and that information is also going to be on our site. So investment justification, all applicants must develop a formal IJ that addresses each investment being proposed. And again, I would suggest to go to the website and look at that applicant workshop. It goes through step by step how to fill out your investment justification. And again, that will be updated soon with any changes pertaining to fiscal year 22. NSGP applications are reviewed and scored through the two-phase state and federal process, and that's what I was just touching upon. You send your application first to us, we score it, we send it along to FEMA, and then they score it again. And the combination of those scores determines if you receive the grant. Your application will be reviewed for completeness. You know, do not put refer to section A in your application. Make sure that you answer everything thoroughly that you're asked. Adherence to programmatic guidelines. So all of these things that we're going over, and all of the things in that workshop about the programmatic guidelines you have to follow to a T. The feasibility of your application. Can you complete what you're proposing within the time frame? The period of performance for this grant, you have 3 years to complete this grant. So make sure that what you're proposing is feasible and realistic. On your application, have you asked for equipment that's allowable? So a lot of this grant centers on target hardening equipment. On our website, again, we have what's called the authorized equipment list. This lists out all of the target hardening equipment that is appropriate to apply for this grant. You can only apply for categories under categories 14 and 15, and there's 2 exceptions to that have come into play. I'm going to talk about those in a moment, but for the most part, target hardening equipment has to fall under sections or categories 14 and 15 on our website. And you'll also be assessed for how well your IJ addresses that identified risk, those 3 components that I talked about. Allowable costs. So under the federal program, there's some distinctions from the state. This program allows for the equipment under those categories, 14 and 15, and the 2 exceptions that I'll discuss. Also management and administration. Managing this grant is a lot of work. Some people feel overwhelmed by it. You have the option to hire a consultant. You also can use your own staff, and that money's 5% of the grant. So if you had $150,000, for example, you'd be able to get $7,500 towards the M&A costs, which is very helpful. If you don't spend all of the grant, please be mindful. So say you spent $100,000, you don't get the full $7,500. You only get 5% of what is actually expended. This grant allows monies for training, exercise, planning, and also security guards. You can use the funds all for security guards if you wish. So applicants have really found a lot of satisfaction being able to use those monies for security guards for protections that happened in recent years. The investments or projects described in the IJ must be for the location that the nonprofit occupies at the time of the application. So if you're building something now and you expect it to be finished down the road, don't apply for this grant now. You have to be in the space where you're gonna use the equipment. If you lease a building, you need to get permission, you know, to utilize the target hardening equipment. Fiscal year 21 changes. This is what I was talking about. Allowable equipment comes from those 2 categories, but there were some changes made last year. You now are able to get monies for handheld radios, which is very positive, and also public warning systems, which a lot of people really wanted to be able to have. So if an agency does want to tie its PA system into an existing phone system, I just want to note that the expenses associated with the tie-in would be allowable, but the grant will not pay for a new phone system. Okay, just a little side piece. Training, exercise, and planning. I did note that you can seek out funds for these purposes. Training related costs under the NSGP grant are limited to attendance fees for training and related expenses like materials, supplies, and equipment. There are some free trainings, many free trainings that are offered. I put an example of one, actor shooter preparedness we have through us or through that site. So you can look into that before you want, expend monies for trainings that are already available and free. Make sure that you absolutely have to. Exercise funding may be used to conduct security related exercises and planning, which is very important for agencies. Funding can be used for emergency planning expenses and the materials that are required to conduct those planning activities. So this grant federal distinct from the state in that you can seek monies for these different areas that I've noted. Security personnel. The program is limited to federal, state, county, or municipal law enforcement officers, active special law enforcement officers, or security officers. The security personnel that you hire, they must be what's called SORA certified. That stands for Security Officer Registration Act. The link is indicated above, so please look into what that pertains to and what it requires. The funding is exclusively for the hiring of security personnel. It may not be used to supplant expenses. So if you have in your budgets monies allocated for security, you cannot use these grant monies to replace those monies. You can use it to augment or supplement, so you can increase security presence. That's very important. Unallowable costs. General operating expenses are not permissible. Go through a few here. Initiatives that do not address the core capabilities discussed prior. You cannot use the monies for the development of your investment justification, travel expenses, and others listed there for your review. Also, I do want to note one of the target hardening items that you can get, it's fencing. Costs, professional fees, and township fees associated with the erection of a fence are not permissible under this grant. Okay, applications will not be scored or recommended for funding for the following reasons. Failure to provide that vulnerability risk assessment, very important. Failure to include your mission statement. Some people submit their own application template. That's not okay. Please use the Excel IJ template that's going to be up on our website. You cannot get funds if you're not a 501c3 organization. If you do not include your DUNS number, this is a change this year. You're not going to have to include your DUNS number. You're going to be asked for a unique entity identifier. And this is something we're learning about when the notice of funding opportunity comes out. We'll be speaking more about this, but it's going to be different than the DUNS number that was supplied in the past. Applicants that applied to the wrong program, remember I said to be careful about your geographic area, could be disqualified. And of course, submitting the application past the deadline. Important dates to remember. Open application period for the grant this year is going to commence May 2022. We anticipate this year an abbreviated open application period. There was ample time last year, which was very nice. So please, I want to encourage you to get ready now. Check out those workshops, start to pull together your vulnerability risk assessment and be prepared and ready to go. That will help you get a leg up on things. NJOHSP anticipates the release of the notice of funding opportunity on May 13th or sooner. So keep checking our website. And there's something about the UEI. So applicants now will be expected to obtain a unique entity identifier. I have a link to a document that FEMA put out. It's a quick start guide about the grants, so you could take a look at that as well. We think possibly that the investment justification is going to be revised this year. So if you're trying to fill out the old exactly, you might have to make some modifications and changes based upon what comes out when the NOFO comes out. Update your vulnerability risk assessment. Make sure if you've gotten equipment, if you have benefited from one of these grants or had things done to your facility, make sure that that's updated in your vulnerability risk assessment. These grants last year allocated $90 million, which is amazing for the UA region, and $90 million for the state. So it's a lot of money out there, and it's definitely worth the effort. And it's a great thing to protect your agency with all of these projects that are available. So that, in a nutshell, is the federal program. I'm going to quickly go through the state program. The state administered grant program was established by way of Assembly Bill A3906. It was amended in 2019 to include funding for two separate programs. So there's a security personnel program and a target hardening equipment program. You can apply for two separate programs, and these require separate applications. For the security personnel program, you can ask for a maximum of $10,000. The period of performance is different than the federal. It's 1 year. Okay. There's the target hardening equipment program, and that's separate. Maximum amount of your request can be $50,000. Period of performance is 2 years. Again, competitive grant programs. All funds are awarded on a reimbursement basis, same as federal, and no cash advancements with these programs. Eligibility for the programs. Eligible nonprofit organizations may apply annually for both the security personnel program and the target hardening program for the state, but each nonprofit organization may only be awarded funding for one state program per fiscal year. So when you do apply, if you did both programs for the state, you're going to be asked what your preference would be in the event that you are selected. So, pick one or the other. You cannot have both. Additionally, the NJOHSP shall assign a preference for eligible applicants that have not received either federal or state security grant funding prior. So if you have not gotten monies, this again possibly will give you a leg up. Management, administration, training, exercise planning, these are not allowable costs under the state program. So if you're looking for those items, you definitely should look to the federal program. Application requirements, pretty much the same. You need that 501c3 letter, if applicable. You need that vulnerability risk assessment, and there's the links again and information on those. Your investment justification questions are a little bit different on the state application, but same components. And say the mission statement, again, is a separate document as well. Security personnel for that grant, we went over this, highlighted again, limit it to federal, state, county, municipal law enforcement. They must be SOAR certified. Again, you can't supplant, you have to supplement funding for security personnel. So if you already have monies in the budget, you need to augment those and supplement, not replace. Key changes, we did go over this, same for the state. Allowable equipment outside of AEL categories consist of the handheld radios and the public warning systems. That is the same for the state as well. And unallowable costs, travel, management and administration, planning, training, grant application expenses to prepare, any costs not specified in your IJ, or costs that are incurred before the grant start date. And your state application, the review of it, reviewed the same way as the federal. They're scored through a state level review process for completeness, adherence to your programmatic guidelines, feasibility, and how well the IJ identifies the risk. The scoring for the state application is all done internally at the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security. That's another difference between that and the federal. Application review recommendations. Applications will not be scored or recommended for funding for the following reasons: failure to provide that vulnerability assessment, failure to provide your mission statement, same reasons that we indicated for the federal program. State of New Jersey NSGP, the application for the program is currently closed. You can visit our website for updates as they become available. The next open application period for the state program, it's expected after the ratification of the state budget, which happens in the summer. So this application is not going to open for quite some time, whereas the federal, again, is happening very soon. In the meantime, I would suggest that you update your VRA. Again, dated VRAs may result in point reductions, especially if we're aware that you've received target hardening equipment per other grants and you haven't incorporated or made your VRA current based upon that. And that concludes my program. I have listed here the contacts for both the federal and state programs. You can reach out to us with questions. We're happy to help you. We're pleased to, walk you through this process and hopefully help you to have success with securing these very important resources. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Margaret. That was very helpful. We appreciate you walking us through everything.
Absolutely.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Williams. I'm the grants manager here at Congresswoman Sherrill's office, and we appreciate you joining us, and we hope that information was helpful. Just a couple of things before we get to your questions. I do see 2 questions in the chat box, and we have a relatively smaller group here, so I can actually bring you guys live to ask them directly. So in addition to the 2 we already have, feel free to use the raise hand function, and we can bring you live from there. As Margaret said, we do expect the official notice of funding opportunity to come out in May, but we wanted to make sure we had this on your radar, as obviously you can see there's some work that goes into it. So once the funding opportunity is released, we'll continue to stay in touch with NJOHSP, notify you of anything important that we see once the notice of funding opportunity comes out. And we'll also give you a heads up once the state program becomes available too. So we'll continue to stay in touch with you. If you think of any questions that don't get addressed this morning, just let us know. We'll coordinate and get you an answer. But without further ado, let's get to some of your questions. So please forgive me, I don't see your titles and your names here listed. So forgive me if I am unable to use your title, but the first one comes from Mr. Robert Jones. Mr. Jones, would you like to come live and ask that directly?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, so we applied for, so I'm the treasurer of Temple Sherrill Fellow Israel in South Orange. We applied for the New Jersey program and were awarded a grant under the New Jersey program. Does that limit for hardening equipment, not for security personnel? We have needs for security personnel. Are we limited now to apply? Can we still apply for the federal program, and does one offset the other?
You can apply for the federal. You applied for both the state for security personnel and for target hardening?
No, we only applied for the target hardening equipment.
Okay.
So we were awarded a grant under that, and then subsequent to that, we've identified we need like security personnel as well over and above what we currently do.
Okay.
Is it permissible to apply for the federal program? You
can still apply for the federal program. Like I said, sometimes points are given to help, agencies that have not had an opportunity as of yet. So sometimes, and the way that's determined kind of is an evolving process. We'll learn more when the NOFO comes out, but I would say that you can still apply, and it's possible that you could get both. But your likelihood is probably reduced based upon how they assign those points.
And do you know, is it the likelihood of getting fully rejected or just getting a lower amount?
I would say probably rejected.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jones. Next, we have Margaret Suskower. I'm sorry, Miss Mara Suskower. Go right ahead.
Okay, great. Hi, thank you. This is Mara Suskower. I'm the executive director at Temple B'nai Abraham in Livingston. Margaret, I think you answered my question a little after I had asked it, but it was about the timeliness of the vulnerability studies. If you've done one a year ago with the police and walked through, for example, is that still good data to submit, or do we need something, something newer?
I think if you've done it within a year's time frame, that is fresh enough, unless you've had any major things, added to the agency or projects that need to be noted on it. I think that you would be fine.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. This was very informative today. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. And next I see Mr. Gary Furman has his hand raised. Go right ahead, Mr. Furman.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Hi, good morning. I was just going to offer any insight or assistance on the Q&A section. My name is Gary Furman. I'm from the Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness. I'm the Deputy Bureau Chief here. So if there are any questions, I can definitely assist.
Thank you, Mr. Furman. I don't see anyone else enter a question or with their hand raised. We can give it another minute while we just close with some additional housekeeping things. The department was kind enough to share the slides from today's presentation. So as you can see, that included a lot of the contact information and things like that. So we'll make sure that gets around to you. They also sent over some great links that are going to be helpful to you. And we recorded this presentation as well. So we will post that to our YouTube channel. And we will share that with you as well. We do have a few weeks ahead before the funding opportunity is released. So, feel free to share this with any other interested applicants in your community. We would love to see more and more people apply to this and get successful applications. So, please continue to look out for my emails and our follow-up outreach. And we're here to answer your questions if you have any. Margaret, anything else you'd like to cover before we go?
I think that's, just underscore again, get started. It's an involved process. It can be overwhelming. Things can come up. So, start to pull together your information, start to think through the questions in the investment justification. That might change a little bit, like I said, but what's out there already definitely is going to be the core of the application process. So getting a jump on it is probably the best advice, and we wish you the best of luck, and reach out to us with any questions. We really pride ourselves on customer service. So you will get a response, and sometimes government entities you do not, but we're here to help you and really walk you through things. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us. Like I said, feel free to reach out to us if we can help you with anything, and please continue to look out for our updates on these programs. So hope you have a great day, have a great week, and we look forward to talking to you soon. Bye now.
Thank you.